He is the Lord of storms who corrupts human hearts through the promise of absolute power, whose ancient authority once commanded entire civilizations before becoming the ultimate symbol of rebellion against divine authority. But what cosmic battle transformed this supreme deity into the enemy of all legitimate power? And why does his influence strike at the very heart of how we understand authority itself? This is Demonology Explained, and today we're exploring the question, who is Baal, and how has this ancient lord used corrupted power to lead humanity away from true divine authority? Most people think demons are obviously evil from the start. They picture fallen angels or dark spirits that never had any legitimate power. But what if I told you that one of the most dangerous demons in spiritual warfare was once worshipped as the supreme god by entire civilizations? What if the most corrupting spiritual force in history actually started with legitimate divine authority? Meet Baal. Not just any demon. The storm god who ruled nations for over 1,000 years before his cosmic rebellion transformed him into the ultimate corrupter of power itself. Because while other demons might attack individuals, Baal attacks the very concept of legitimate authority. And here's the shocking part: his methods haven't changed. They've just found new expressions in modern politics, religion, and personal ambition. For over a millennium, millions of people built massive temples to Baal. They offered sacrifices. They begged him for rain and crops. They believed he was their protector, provider, and god. Archaeological evidence shows elaborate priesthoods, royal backing, and state religion status across multiple kingdoms. But here's what most people don't know. Baal wasn't originally a name, it was a title. The word simply meant lord, master, or husband. It was used for various gods throughout the ancient Near East. The most powerful was Baal Hadad, the storm god described as the rider of clouds. In farming societies, this made him the most important deity imaginable. No rain meant no crops. No crops meant death. Control the storms, control everything. The ancient world didn't see Baal as evil. The Ugaritic text ancient clay tablets discovered in Syria reveal him as a complex deity fighting cosmic battles against death and chaos. He represented order, fertility, and life itself. But what happens when legitimate authority becomes corrupted by pride? What happens when divine power starts demanding worship instead of giving service? That's where our story really begins. We have to journey back 500 years to ancient Canaan to understand how a god becomes a demon. The transformation wasn't instant, it was gradual, subtle, and it followed a pattern that still operates today. Baal started as legitimate divine authority. The ancient world understood that storms brought both life and death. Rain meant crops, but too much rain meant floods. Lightning meant divine power, but it could also mean destruction. This created a crucial insight. The same force that gives life can take life. The same power that blesses can curse. Authority itself is neutral. It's how that authority is used that determines whether it serves divine purpose or corrupts it. The Hebrew scriptures don't dismiss Baal as fake. They present him as real spiritual power, but power in rebellion against Yahweh, the one true God. This wasn't about whether Baal had power. This was about the source and legitimacy of that power. Ancient texts reveal that Baal's corruption began with a fundamental shift. Instead of using his authority to serve creation, he started demanding that creation serve him. Instead of blessing flowing from relationship, blessing became transactional. This is crucial to understand. Baal didn't become evil by losing power. He became evil by corrupting power, by transforming legitimate authority into exploitative dominance. Here's where everything changes. When the Israelites entered Canaan, they didn't just encounter a different culture, they encountered a completely different understanding of divine power itself. The climactic moment comes in 1 Kings 18, Elijah's showdown with 450 prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel. This wasn't just a religious debate, this was cosmic warfare. Two completely different systems of divine authority facing off. Here's what makes this confrontation so terrifying. Elijah didn't deny Baal's power, he challenged its source. When Baal's prophets couldn't bring fire from heaven despite hours of desperate ritual, it exposed something crucial about Baal's fundamental corruption. The showdown revealed Baal's core methodology, transactional spirituality. Do this ritual, get that blessing. Make this sacrifice, receive that favor. Pay this price, gain that power. This is why his followers cut themselves and cried out for hours. They believed divine blessing had to be earned through performance. The more desperate the ritual, the more likely Baal would respond. But here's the shocking insight. This transactional approach to divine power didn't disappear when Baal's prophets failed. It transformed. It adapted. It found new expressions in every generation since. Medieval scholars didn't just study Baal as ancient history. They documented his influence as a present reality, operating through three specific corruptions of legitimate authority. Unlike demons that attack through obvious evil, Baal specializes in corrupting good things. He takes legitimate authority and transforms it into illegitimate dominance. He doesn't create new power, he corrupts existing power. Here's his methodology. First, he identifies legitimate authority structures: government, religion, family, business, any system where people need guidance, protection, or provision. These aren't bad things. They're necessary for human flourishing. But Baal corrupts these healthy foundations. He whispers that authority exists for itself rather than for those it serves. He suggests that power should be worshipped rather than stewarded. He plants the lie that might makes right. Medieval theologians documented specific patterns in his attacks. He typically begins by drawing attention to the benefits of authority. Normal leadership becomes ego-driven dominance. Healthy influence becomes manipulative control. Natural hierarchy becomes oppressive exploitation. The progression follows a predictable pattern. First, authority serves people. Then authority serves itself. Then people serve authority. Finally, authority demands worship. Here's where we reach the turning point. Baal doesn't simply corrupt individual leaders. He systematically transforms the very concept of authority from service-based to worship-based. Medieval theologians understood that Baal represents the anti-service principle. He's the force that transforms human authority from divine stewardship into demonic dominance. Instead of servant leadership, he creates lordship service. Instead of power for others, he creates power over others. His methodology becomes clear when you look at how corruption spreads through institutions. He identifies natural hierarchy and legitimate authority structures. Then, he systematically corrupts the purpose of that authority from service to self-aggrandizement. Where God intended authority to serve people, Baal creates authority that serves itself. Where power should enable flourishing, he creates power that demands submission. Where leadership should sacrifice for followers, he creates followers who sacrifice for leadership. Here's the most terrifying part. He doesn't want people to simply follow corrupt leaders. He wants authority itself to become impossible. He wants service to be unthinkable. He wants legitimate governance to be naive and exploitative power to be the only logical approach to human organization. Now we reach the climax of understanding just how devastating Baal's influence can be. His corruption operates through multiple forms of authority destruction, each one designed to make genuine service impossible. Transactional spirituality. This is where it starts. Baal whispers that divine blessing must be earned through performance. That relationship with God is really a business transaction. That grace is actually payment for good behavior. Political messianism. This goes deeper. Under Baal's influence, people invest ultimate hope in human leaders. They view politicians as saviors rather than servants. They believe the right candidate or policy will solve all problems. Institutional capture. This is where it gets dangerous. Baal's influence transforms organizations meant to serve into systems that serve themselves. Churches focused on building empires rather than building faith. Governments existing for their own power rather than their people's welfare. Authority worship. This is the most insidious form. Baal corrupts legitimate respect for authority. He convinces people that power should be worshipped rather than stewarded. That leaders deserve devotion rather than accountability. Under his influence, the exercise of authority becomes indistinguishable from the demand for worship. People become convinced that their submission to power is actually wisdom rather than idolatry. Here's where ancient demonology becomes urgently relevant for today's world. Baal's methodologies haven't disappeared. They've found perfect expression in modern political systems and institutional structures. Social media has created the most powerful authority worship engine in human history. Influencer culture where personalities become brands, and brands become objects of devotion. Political tribes that demand absolute loyalty to leaders rather than principles. Modern psychology has identified numerous patterns that align perfectly with ancient descriptions of Baal's influence: cult of personality, authoritarian submission, celebrity worship. The growing inability of people to distinguish between legitimate authority and corrupted power. The rise of political extremism follows Baal's exact pattern. Take legitimate concerns about governance and transform them into worship of strong leaders. Make every policy disagreement feel like spiritual warfare. Turn democracy into competition between political messiahs. Corporate culture operates the same way. Instead of business serving customers and employees serve business. Instead of leadership developing people, people exist to advance leadership. Instead of profit supporting purpose, profit becomes purpose. Prosperity theology has weaponized Baal's methodology. Sow a seed, offerings to get divine favor. Pay the preacher, get the miracle. Give to receive. This is Baal's exact pattern from Mount Carmel, corrupting divine relationship through transaction. But here's the good news. Traditional religious texts provide clear guidance for protection against Baal's influence, and these principles work just as well today as they did 3,000 years ago. The primary defense against Baal's corruption is understanding the true nature of legitimate authority, not power that demands worship, but power that gives service. Understanding that all human authority is stewardship, not ownership. The Hebrew concept of covenant embodies this perfectly. In covenant, authority serves relationship rather than replacing it. Power exists to enable flourishing, not to demand submission. Leadership sacrifices for followers rather than requiring followers to sacrifice for leadership. Traditional spiritual practices like accountability, transparency, and servant leadership all serve to counter the power worship that makes Baal's corruption possible. These practices reinforce the truth that authority is temporary stewardship, not permanent ownership. The biblical account of Jesus' temptation provides the perfect template. When Satan offered Jesus all the kingdoms of the world, Jesus refused not because he couldn't have that power, but because he understood that legitimate authority comes from service, not conquest. As we reach the end of our exploration of Baal, we arrive at a crucial understanding. The transformation from storm god to demon of corrupted power reveals something timeless about authority itself. Our tendency to worship power instead of stewarding it, and to serve systems instead of being served by them. Whether you understand this as literal demonic influence or as a powerful metaphor for destructive power patterns, Baal represents one of humanity's most fundamental and dangerous temptations. In our age of political polarization and institutional corruption, the ancient warnings about the Lord of Storms carry more relevance than ever before. The ultimate message isn't one of fear about human authority, it's about wisdom concerning its sacred purpose. Understanding Baal's influence provides insight into the spiritual dimensions of power, the difference between authority that serves and authority that demands service. In a world that constantly worships power instead of stewarding it, the ancient wisdom about Baal offers a different way, the possibility of genuine authority, leadership that serves others, power that enables rather than exploits. You now understand the full story, from legitimate storm god to corrupted power demon. From divine authority to demonic dominance, from service-based leadership to worship-demanding lordship. The pattern has been revealed, the methodology exposed, the ancient warnings made clear. What will you choose? The corrupted authority that demands worship while delivering oppression, or the legitimate authority that gives service while enabling flourishing? The power that exploits others for your benefit, or the power that sacrifices your benefit for others? The path of transactional dominance, or the way of covenant service? But remember this, in choosing servant leadership over power worship, stewardship over ownership, service over dominance, you're not just making a personal decision. You're participating in a spiritual battle that has raged since legitimate authority first became corrupted by pride. The storm god still whispers his promises of power through domination. He still offers the false satisfaction of worship disguised as the true satisfaction of service. But authentic authority, humble, sacrificial, service-based authority remains not just possible, but powerful. It is, in fact, the only force capable of driving out the institutional corruption that Baal represents. Because here's the final truth. Corrupted power enslaves, but servant leadership liberates. Authority worship creates oppression, but authority stewardship creates flourishing. Demanding service makes authority impossible, but giving service makes authority inevitable. The choice, as always, is yours to make.